So it's our great pleasure this evening to have Paul and Chris with us, all the way from Leicestershire and Loughborough. I think that's right. So without any more waffle from me, let's welcome.
Thank you, folks. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the wonderful curry coming from Leicester. We have the best curry houses this side of the Pecos, and that was up there with the best, so thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Paul, although everybody calls me Gasky, which is my surname with a Y on the end. So if you call me Paul later, then, and I don't answer you, I'm not being ignorant, but I very rarely answer to Paul. And this is my very good friend and brother in Christ, Chris. And we're going to share a story tonight, which hopefully will illustrate two questions which I get asked a lot as I travel around. And one of them is, I want to see a bit of evidence about this Jesus character. And the second one is, and I don't really get how prayer is answered. They're the two main questions I get asked, and we'll revisit those a little bit later on. So I want to take you back to the 9th of October 19... what am I doing? 19? 9th of October 2010. So Andy, can I have the next slide, please, in the style of Chris Whitty? Next slide, mate, if you would. Here we go. 9th of October 2010 was a day that most Leicester people won't forget in a hurry. I mean, nothing to you, but it's extra special for me because the 9th of October 2010 was the day that I was licensed by the Church of England as an evangelist. So it was, you have to have a bit of paper in the Church of England to do stuff like that. And it was the culmination of 3 years theological study. And I'm no academic. My background's in the police. And I spent 30 years as a warranted officer and then 4.5 years as a civilian. And a little bit more on that I'll touch on in a minute. But the 9th of October 2010, I was due to be licensed by the Bishop of Leicester as an evangelist, as I say. And I was a year away from retiring from the Leicestershire Police. And also, 9th of October 2010, in our city, were a lot of mainly young men who were adorned in those sort of markings. We had about 2,000, again, mainly young men, who were representing an organisation called the English Defence League, and they descended on our city for a protest. And it was surreal, really, because we'd got people gathering in the cathedral in Leicester, and we'd got people adorned in these markings gathering outside. And on my way to the cathedral, it was considering it was a Saturday morning, it was really quiet, and I know that lots of people were afraid to come into the city for fear of violence and everything else. And it was quite a violent day, which we'll touch on again shortly. So it's a really special day. So I'm sitting there waiting for this service to start, and it's a big thing for me. Like I say, I'm no academic, and to get through 3 years of theological training was a big thing. And my family were there, my church family were there, and it was a real big occasion for me. So as we started to get together, as were people who I trained with, that's 10 press-ups in CVM if you do that, by the way, but I'll let you off. Yeah, so I've lost my train of thought now. So we were gathering to be licensed by the bishop, as I say, and these were people I'd also trained with for 3 years. one of whom wasn't there. This is now. If it's my wife, can you tell her I had the salad? Yeah, so there were other people there who had also done their 3 years training and were also being licensed into various ministries. And one of them was a young lady by the name of Samantha Reyes. And Sam wasn't there. She was Latin American, beautiful dark skin, jet black hair, a really, really nice lady. And she wasn't there for this licensing service. So I said to one of my friends, "Where's Sam?" And they said, "She's not coming, she's too scared because of these people outside." And if I say that I prayed a prayer using language which I probably shouldn't have used, certainly not in Leicester Cathedral, I prayed this prayer, and I was so angry because I just thought, Sam's worked as hard as I have to get to this point in her ministry, and she's not here because of these people outside. So I prayed this prayer and I said, basically, look, Lord, if I can do anything, then I want you to use me. I don't know what I can do, but I want you to use me. And like I say, I used language that I probably shouldn't. And at this point, with that in mind, with that scene set, I'm just going to hand you over to my brother Chris.
How are you all? It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, we're just two men that have one thing in common, and that's that we both follow Jesus. And our stories are no different to a lot of people. There's one thing, every single one of us in this room today, we all have a story. Right, it could be different, but we've still all got a story. Some of us have suffered, some of us have been hurt, some of us have done wrong things, some of us have been bullied, and the list can go on and on and on. And our story is no better than your story, but we've all got a story. And one of the things I've come to realise is that I believe that we've got a God that is still relevant today, and he's still offering transformation. And this is really a story about transformation, and I give him all the glory to it. We just took part in it. So a bit about myself. Yeah, I live in Loughborough at the minute, but our family, we come from the northeast, the beautiful city of Newcastle, who are by far going to be the greatest football team ever known. No, sorry, I'm digressing there. But my dad was strict. He was an ex-sergeant in the parachute regiment. And what he said went. And I daren't say anything against my dad, because I'd get it big time. I loved him to bits. He was rock solid. And when he left the British Army, he wanted to carry on helping people, so he joined the police force. And the choice was, he went for Northumbria Police and Leicestershire Police, and Leicestershire Police came through, and that's why we ended up in this place called Leicestershire. Anyway, that had a lot of trouble for me. And I'm sure that when I share things, a lot of you are going to say, yeah, I know what that feels like. I was there. We lived in a close-knit town. I'd call it white working class, as it was then. And everyone knew my dad. They knew what he was. And that jacket that he put on became the same jacket that what I put on, even though I didn't know anything about the police, apart from they were there to help us when things go wrong. That's what I was led to believe, and that's how I grew up. So our family was surrounded by the police. So I was always a good kid, never did anything wrong. So I couldn't quite understand why the world could be such a cruel place. Because I loved animals, I loved the stars, I loved going off in fields, climbing trees, falling out of them, falling in stinging nettles, trying to trace dock leaves, and all that sort of stuff. Just a normal kid who loved the world, but the world didn't love me because they kicked me every day, punched me, spat on me, urinated on me because of my dad's job, being a policeman. School gave up on me, and they gave me a label called dyslexia, and they put me at the back of the class back in the 70s, late 70s. That's what happened. There wasn't these extra things for you available to help you. And I even remember one of the parents' evenings overhearing the year head say to my mum and dad, "We don't think Chris has the intelligence to pass an exam." And I just sank into the chair and I cried. And I couldn't understand it, why I was being written off, because I wanted to play with everyone. I wasn't bothered what skin colour someone had. I wasn't bothered whether they had a disability. All I knew that I wanted to play and have friends, and my friends became fewer and fewer. And that carried on until I had what I can only describe. I was about 7. I came downstairs and I couldn't speak. Doctors think I had kind of a nervous breakdown, and that lasted quite a few months. I couldn't get my words out, and then when all of a sudden I couldn't actually speak without getting all of my words mixed up, back to front, and I developed this really, really, really bad stammer, and I got a kicking for that as well. So now not only was I ostracised for that uniform, I was classed as being different, and all I wanted to do was being liked. I was just little Chris. He didn't want any harm anyone. And the final straw was when I came home from school, or should I say ran home from school to escape being picked off. And I gets home and my dad had gone upstairs because he didn't feel too good, didn't think anything of it, because my dad was immortal. He was going to live forever and ever and ever. And I heard this horrible noise, and my mum went upstairs, and my dad had had a massive heart attack, and she called me up the stairs to help him. Well, casualty wasn't around in them days, and I didn't know CPR. And I was punching his chest and trying to breathe into his mouth, and I kind of knew he was dead because of the state of him. And the ambulance came, and they said you should have rolled him off the bed onto a hard surface to try CPR. So I blamed myself for that as well, and I ran away from home for a good 4 or 5 hours. At the funeral, it was awesome, as far as there was thousands there, and the police lined the streets and saluted my dad as we took him to the crematorium, and I was so proud of my dad. I loved him so much. And then we went back home, and there was lots of police drinking my dad's whiskey and having a laugh, telling jokes and stories about my dad. And I was too young to understand it was their way of saying goodbye. And I'm thinking, what are you laughing at? What's funny? He's only been in the ground a few hours. Why are you laughing? What's all this about? And I ran upstairs, locked myself in the room, and I honestly, the good kid was hurting so bad, I declared war on the world, war on my bullies. I wasn't going to love anyone ever again, because those that I love get taken away from me. Keep people away from me. No one's going to punch me again, swear at me again, or abuse me ever again. And I made a hit list of all the lads that had made my life a misery. I picked them off one by one because they were nothing on their own, and it made me feel good for about 5 minutes. I had this massive crater missing in my life, and I couldn't deal with it. I'd literally swung from being a good kid to I just didn't care anymore. And I realised I could give a punch as well as take one, because I'd always taken a punch. You get used to it after a while. And then the drink came, the drugs came. I was just trying to bury my head to forget the pain that I was in. The arrest came, And this is a former copper's kid. The embarrassment that my mum had when the police, very police who worked with my dad, were coming around the house to tell her that I'd been in trouble. But I didn't know who I was. I didn't really know who I was. I didn't have a sense of belonging, because everyone didn't want to know. And I'd also pushed everyone away as well. I played my part. But I had no way forward. And I was really incredibly insular. Our family wasn't Christian. We never went to church apart from the usual funerals and all that sort of stuff, or marriages, but we were deeply into spiritualism. So I always kind of felt there was something more than just we were some mistake that happened after an explosion in some solar system. And I started to get sucked in and learning about the occult, and the darker it went, the more I spiraled into it, and it gave me a strange sense of comfort, even though it was dark. I'd made a pact with hate. I thought I could handle it. It handled me. Like I said, I didn't hate anyone more than I hated myself. I would have to punch myself in the mirror every time I saw my reflection, because I hated what I seen until I bled. That's how much I hated myself. But I blamed it on the world. It was everyone else's issue, why I was the way I was. And eventually, the arrest turned into being locked away. And they realised mentally I wasn't quite there. So not only did I get locked up in kind of a jail, I was also forced medication to control me. And the longest stretch I did was 18 months. Locked up with this, with no privileges or anything. Followed around everywhere I went, because I was deemed as a risk. And the hate grew worse, worse and worse. And then someone come up to me and said, "Why don't you come and join us? We're a good set of lads. We're just like you, Chris. You know, we're naffed off with what's going off, especially with all these foreigners coming in and taking over the jobs and the housing. Don't you think that's true, Chris?" And then any time I asked questions, I always got told, "You can't ask that question because it's racist. We can't have these conversations." And that's where it's so wrong, because we need to have these, young men need to have these conversations. If we have it in the open and we realise and look at the truth, all I was told was lies, because the truth wouldn't speak to us, or me anyway. So I started going down the football, getting mixed up in all that stuff. And then I started to follow England around, and I had this strange sense of I'm this Anglo-Saxon warrior that was put on planet Earth. So basically, we are going to rule Europe whenever we go out, and we're going to claim back our streets from what's happening. And at that time, it seemed the government were letting anyone in. And that's what we saw or felt was happening. So we became directly involved in it. I joined the British National Party, and I didn't see no skinheads or anything like that. I saw men with war medals on their chest who'd fought for this country, who were proud of what they'd done, and they were saying the country was selling their soul. And I even stood in an election, and I'm telling you now, I know nothing about politics, but I look good in a suit, and that was good enough for the BNP. Not exactly, they weren't exactly the brightest bunch on planet Earth, but then again, neither was I, because I was mixed up in it. But it gave me a sense of belonging. That's the only thing that it gave me. The rest of my life gave me no belonging, but suddenly, these people gave me a sense of belonging. Free drugs, free drink, will attack people because of this political motivation and that political motivation. In the end, I didn't know who was not my enemy. I was that paranoid of everyone that I remember there was this guy sitting in the car outside where I lived, and he was there every day. He had a tie on and a clipboard. He was writing stuff down. And I'm thinking, that's the old Bill. They're watching us. watching me. I'm not having it. Every morning I'm tweaking the curtains. On about Friday, 5th day, I've charged his car, opened my door, and I've ran at this bloke, dragged him out of the car. Who are you? Who are you? He says, I'm British Gas, mate. Now, you would say with the price hike, maybe I should have hit him, but yeah, it was that sort of paranoia, right? Innocent bloke, gets in his car, off he went. And this became my life. This became the norm. But really, the reality was, inside, I'm still little Chris. I just wanted to be accepted, but I just didn't know who it was anymore. Had a row with the BNP, started my own thing, using the internet was around now, and we would start to get information on people that we didn't like through the internet, £10 a month, there's websites out there, you can trace anyone very quick, and we started to use that. It could be church leaders, gay, liberal, Democrat, councillors, you name it, they all became a legitimate target. And I'm not proud of any of this, I'm not here to big any of this up, this is as it was. And eventually, we were seen to be fields ahead of some of the other groups, and I was approached by, you might have heard of Combat 18, there's other similar paramilitary groups out there, and I was asked if I would help them to carry on doing their work. So now it was very much ex-soldiers showing you how to make homemade devices, and oh yeah, it's awful, and I'm not going to go into any of it because it was bad. I did wrong things, I hurt people, and I paid the price quite rightly. But I still wasn't prepared to take responsibility for my actions. They finally locked me away, and that time away gives you time to think. And the first thing I thought was the best place for me is in a box. I've got 3 children who wouldn't talk to me. 3 children that wanted to call me daddy, but didn't know who their dad was. I kept them at arm's length. I didn't bathe them, play with them, change their nappies, because I was too scared to, in case that love made me weak, made me soft. And it was awful for them. And one of the consequences of that is I still don't see some of my kids now. They don't want to see me. I get that. I have to give them that room. I've hurt them. You've got to take responsibility. But the door's always open. They know who I am now. But time is what I can give them, because I never gave them anything before. The relationships with the women, I'd use that. Do as you're told. Back chat that, you'll get it. And yet again, I was fearful of love. They didn't deserve it. Am I proud of it? No, I'm not. Lost all my relationships, lost my children, lost 3 houses, you name it, I've lost it because of me thinking I was good, thinking I was somebody, thinking that I could fight this world system out there. And when it becomes apparent you can't, where do you go with that? You're going on yourself. And just before I met this fella, who would have been an enemy, wouldn't have even stood this close to me. Right? Even though my dad was a copper, they were now my enemy, because I felt they took my dad from me. And the government gave me 3 men as mentors, and these guys went way above and beyond what they should have done to keep me out of trouble. They were awesome. One of the guys was an Asian guy called Manny. He knew all my history. He said at first he didn't want to work with me. But you know what? I saw in him a man who bled like me, who loved football, even though he supported a rubbish football team. And he was always there. And I met Gask, who came along to a couple of the talks I was doing in the schools, which was great because I was now talking in schools. I'd turned away from drink, I'd turned away from the drugs, but I still had this hole in it. I was falling apart. And I decided to go for a walk one day with a piece of rope. I found my spot, and there was no one there. It was a beautiful spring morning, there was no wind, and I thought, right, this is it, best thing for everyone. I've gone utterly selfish thoughts and thinking, but I couldn't take myself any longer because I'd given everything up and I was still feeling this hole. And then I can only describe the trees bending, and there was this massive, gets me now, massive gust of wind. There weren't any wind before, but this was like a tornado, and something hit me in that wind that put me on my knees, and I cried for the first time in years. And whatever passed through me was peace, it was love, it was a supernatural experience, and I can't really describe it to you. And I threw the rope into the bush and I went home. And then a few days after that, surprise to surprise, I get a call off this fella who asked me if I want to come to a men's Christian curry night. That's why I like it here. And I thought, well, yeah, I'll go, because I was fed up with pot noodles. By then they had 7 flavours, so that was one for each day. So, but I thought, I'll have your curry, I'll have your boona. Well, I ain't interested in you, Jesus. And I'll hand over to Gask to tell you what happened next.
So the 9th of October 2010, I pray that prayer, Lord, what can I do? And 12 months later, I retire as a police officer, and I apply for a job because I've still got a mortgage, etc., etc. So I apply for a job, and I think, why don't I work for an organisation I'm used to? So I applied for a job with the Leicestershire Police as a civilian, working in counter-terrorism, which was incredible, really, because my policing background was mainly spent in the safeguarding arena, and I'd got no special branch experience or anything like that. But I applied for this job working in counter-terrorism, as I say, and I got it. I got the job. And I worked in a department which, working with other agencies to deconstruct somebody's ideology. Now, we're not the thought police. You can think what you like. But I think if you have such extreme views that you go down a road where you're likely to hurt other people, then you need some intervention. And that's what my role was. And my remit in this department was to work with those members from the far right. So you can see where this is going, can't you? And the reason they gave me that responsibility, because they said, you meet the profile. You meet the profile. Physically, I met the profile. So very early on, I'm given a file for a bloke called Chris Hardy. And they said, this guy, and forgive me, Chris, he'd just come out of a mental institute, and like he's just alluded to, he'd started, cheers, dears, he'd started to speak to groups of young people, in particular in schools and colleges, not to get involved in the world of hate that he had. And he's not said this, but I read this in his file. For Chris, it started when he was about 10, and he was paid a tenner to put a bag of dog mess through somebody's letterbox. That's what it started for Chris, and he, as he's just said himself, he worked his way up until he became a general for an organisation called the British Freedom Fighters, which are an extreme group. You've never heard of them, probably not, and for good reason. And I've been told off for this before, but the British Freedom Fighters make the English Defence League look like the Mothers Union. That's how extreme they were. And I'm given this file for Chris Hardy. And the more I read, the more I don't like him. And I thought, I don't really like you. And Chris had some quite serious violent history. And I thought, I really don't like you. He was involved in a viable plot to kidnap Tony Blair's kids. That sort of level of criminality we're talking of. And on the eve of Chris going to a political rally in Nottingham, where he was going to set off an explosive device, he had a phone call from one of his children, as he's just said, who said to him, "Dad, why have you never loved me?" Chris had a breakdown, and he was picked up by the police, walking around bare-chested around the streets of Loughborough. And he ended up in hospital, as I say. So I'm given his file. I've got to work with this bloke, and I just think, I don't like you. I've had a police career, and now I've got to work with you, and I don't like you. The first time I met him was when he was speaking at Loughborough College, and on the way home, I thought my car radio was on, because this voice said to me, "I want you to tell him about me." And I thought, bog off. I'm not doing it. And this voice said, "I want you to tell him about me." And I thought, no. And I got home and I said to my beautiful wife, Sue, I said, "I've met this bloke today and he's horrible." I said, he's horrible. And I feel God say to me, "I want you to tell him about me." And my wife said, "Well, you call yourself the men's minister, then you better do it then, haven't you?" And I thought, no, I'm not doing it. And I made the decision, I'm not doing it. Because I thought, as soon as I mention the J word, Jesus, not only will it ruin my professional relationship with him, not that we had much of one anyway, because he didn't like me as much as I didn't like him, but I thought I'll probably lose my teeth. So I'm not even going to mention it. And this voice kept saying to me, "I want you to tell him about me," and it wouldn't go away. It would wake me up in the night. "I want you to tell this fella about me," and I kept fighting against it. So I was talking to my colleagues at Christian Vision for Men about Chris. I've met this bloke, and I don't know what the next step is, and this is what I feel. So they said, "I think you've got to be obedient. God's telling you to do it, you've got to do it." And I says, "I ain't doing it." And they said, you've got to be obedient. And I said, "I ain't doing it, not doing it." And then we were thrown together, and I won't go into the detail because it's not really relevant, but we were thrown together when, on a Sunday, Chris had been invited to go to an anti-bullying conference in South Leicestershire, and because I was his case officer, they wanted me to go with him. Now I'm a bit mercenary because I said I'll do it because Sunday overtime, hee. And my boss said, "Look, we're skint. We haven't got any money. We want you to do it for nothing." And I said, "You can do one because I'm not working for nothing. I want you to tell him about me." So much to my colleagues' dismay, I agreed that I would work on a Sunday and spend the day with this fella. And for me, it was a long day. It meant going into the city, picking a car up, driving out to the north of the county, picking Chris up, where we'd shoved him in a safe house in Barrow-on-Soar. That's where all the safe houses are now, so you know where they are. And we had to put him in a safe house because when he made the decision to leave the British Freedom Fighters, they're not an organisation you just say, "I'm not going to come to Monday's meeting and pay my subs." And I know for a fact, and I know Chris has belittled this over the years, but I know for a fact, at least 2 occasions, he's been chased down the street with a van load of blokes with baseball bats and machetes. I know that's happened, hasn't it? I know it has, more than twice. So we had to shove him in a safe house, and we gave him a pseudonym. We had to give him another name, and he was a mess. he was a mess. So this day, I take him to this conference, and I get him in the car, and there's this stunned silence. I really don't particularly want to be there. He doesn't particularly want to be with me, because professionally speaking, I'm over there, Chris is over there. We don't like each other, really. And I remember, I'll never forget his face. He said to me, "I bet you're on a boatload of overtime, ain't you?" With a little bit of Anglo-Saxon thrown in. And I said, "No, mate, I'm not getting paid anything for today." And he looked at me rather quizzically and he said, "Why not?" And before I could stop myself, I said, "Because I believe in Jesus Christ and he thinks you're worth it." And I thought, I didn't mean to say it. I didn't mean to say it. And it kicked off a conversation, which again Chris has alluded to. On that day, we worked out that although we were miles apart professionally, we were just a couple of blokes who were trying to get through life. And for whatever reason, a lot of it being personal choice, I'd gone one way and he'd gone the other. And I haven't had a perfect life, far from it. But as you'll hear a little bit more tomorrow when my daughter gives her testimony, and she's going to drop me in it, I know she is. So it kicked off a conversation, and as Chris said, we got invited to a curry night. So my beautiful wife said, "Why don't you ring Chris and see if he wants to come for this curry?" And I thought, yeah, why not? So I rang Chris, said, "Look, we're going for a curry. Do you fancy coming?" And he said, "I ain't got any money," with a bit of Anglo-Saxon thrown in. And what I said was, "Do you want to come for a curry?" So we had 18 fellas at this curry night. And the bloke speaking at that event was a guy who some of you may have heard of, a guy called Carl Beach. Carl Beach is the president of Christian Vision for Men, for whom I now represent. And at that time he was our president. And Carl was speaking at our little bloke's backstreet curry night. And it says a lot about Carl because he's an international evangelist, he's planted churches, he runs ministries, blah, 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 he's written books, and yet he's still prepared to turn out to the little bloke's curry night. And Carl was there, and Carl shared this story, which he can't remember. I can, and I'm going to be brief because I'm conscious of the time. Carl shared this story, and he said, Carl is a Baptist minister by trade. He was a one-time Baptist minister, and he was leading a church, and there was a woman in his church whose husband was on the periphery of things. And that's a lot. It goes for a lot of churches. The ladies are involved, the blokes are on the edge, condoning what they do. And this guy was suffering from terminal cancer, and he hadn't got long. So Carl said to this lady, "Can I go and talk to your husband?" And she said, "Yes." So he went to speak to him, and he said to him, "Look, all these years you've been involved on the edge of church, not got involved, but you've been on the edge. Why?" And he said, "Because what I did, God would never forgive. So what did you do?" And he shared this story. He said, 30 years ago, I was publicly humiliated by a bloke. So one night I waited for him. I knew where he was walking home, and I waited for him, and I jumped out the shadows, and I hit him with a bit of timber, a bit of 3x2. He says, unbeknown to me, this had nails in it, and he said, and I battered this bloke with this timber, and I left him in a pool of blood. I thought I killed him, and ran off. He said, 30 years later, he said, I was walking down Billericay High Street, of all places, and I literally bump into this bloke I thought I'd killed all those years before. And the only thing I could think to say to him was, "You don't remember me, do you?" And his victim answered him in an Australian accent. And he said, "I do remember you." And he said, "And when I came out of hospital, I was so scared you were going to come and get me that I emigrated to Australia. And when I was in Australia, I met the risen Lord Jesus Christ, and I forgave you years ago." At this point, this bloke is in bits, absolute bits. A proper bloke's cry. You know, a proper bloke's cry, snot the lot, you know what I mean? A proper bloke's cry. And I'm saying, Chris, what's the matter? This poor waiter in this curry house, it took me ages to convince him that something else was happening and it wasn't the chicken booner he'd just had that caused this effect. And Chris said to me, well, I really do believe that God's forgiven me. And I said, well, claim it then, mate. Claim it. And I took him home, dropped him off. Next day I'm at work, I'm in a meeting, my phone's going bananas, missed call from this fella. And I'll let him share what happened with that. Yeah, I'll hand over to you for that little bit, because you should say that.
Yeah, so I've gone to this curry night where all these men with Valdunican jumpers and various other bits of attire that apparently that's what some Christian men wear. To be honest, I've not seen many men wearing Valdunican jumpers in church, apart from two. So, yeah, I'm at this. I don't know why. Well, I do know why I'm there. I wanted a free curry. I'll be honest. But what nobody knew was when he sat in that car and told me about this man called Jesus. I needed to hear something like that because I'd exhausted what the world had to offer. I've tried psychology. I tried other religions. I tried to put myself right. I tried relationships. I tried everything the world has to offer to get you out of things, and nothing worked. Nothing worked. So I thought, what have I got to lose? At least I'm going to get a free curry. So I went. And I don't know whether you remember years ago when the National Lottery first started, they had this advert with this big finger, and it used to say, "It's you." And when Carl was speaking, I'm thinking, hang on, how do you know all this about me? He was talking about forgiveness, he was talking about pain, he was talking about suffering, he was talking about no one being listened to, he was talking about being let down, bullied, everything that had happened to me. It's as though he knew everything about my life. And I went up to him afterwards, after I'd managed to wipe my nose, and said to him, "How did you know all that?" And he says, "Well, what, mate? I've never met you before. I don't know what you're talking about." I says to him, "How can God forgive a man like me?" Because I've not gone into detail, and I've got no needs to go into detail of some of the things I've done. Right, some people still think I shouldn't be out, if I'm honest, you know. And it was bad. It disgusted me. And I said, "How can God forgive me?" And he says, "Well, have you asked him?" And at this moment, he's turned around and walked off and left me with that. I'm like, what do you mean, talk to God? How can I talk to something I can't even see? And that night, I did. I went home, and I didn't call him God. I think it was something like, "Oi, if you're real, help me." That's all it was. No big speech, no falling on the floor, thrashing. But I knew I was what I call, I've hit the wall. The next phase was, I can't carry on like this. And I had this battle. I couldn't sleep, and I had this battle, more like voices in my head. 1 minute it sounded like, "You don't deserve forgiveness, mate. You're an horrible bloke. Look what you've done to your family, your partners, your kids, and innocent people. You don't deserve anything." And I don't. And then on the other hand, it was this inner, still little voice, like a whisper that said, "Give it to me. Believe." Offload it on my shoulders. it's like, and it's powerful, and it's churning, and it's conflicting. But it was almost like you'd smell the most awesome scent you've ever smelled. I was being drawn towards it. I didn't know what it was. And I managed to get a couple of hours kit. And then I woke up, it was 7:30 in the morning, it's belting it down the rain, and I had this inner desire to get to a church. Put some clothes on, ran down to this church, stood outside these gates. I'm soaking wet, and I'm thinking, you do need your psychiatrist. And then this little old lady there poked her head out. She'd seen me. If you want to come back at 9 o'clock, there's a coffee morning. And, all right, I will. She had a lovely little smile. So I went back at 9 o'clock, and I walked straight into the church. Surprise, surprise, a couple of the lads that went to the curry night were there. Said, Chris, you all right? I said, no. I just collapsed. And, oh dear, I was screaming from the deepest part of my soul of pain, loss, for a God I couldn't see to come and do something. And I said, sorry. And that was it. Bang! There was this instantaneous inner release. It felt like the chains had snapped deep within my soul. And I sprang to my feet, and I'm running around the church like I'd scored a winning goal in the FA Cup final. I didn't know why I was laughing, didn't know why I was crying, but I felt free. I ran home, sprinted home, and I grabbed all the medications the doctors told me I'd be having to take for the rest of my life. And I just chucked them in the bin. I've never needed one since. Never had one since. Because in that instant, I'm not saying I was totally healed of my illnesses, because I still have illnesses. I still take tablets now. But the antipsychotic, the psychotic drugs that they had, right, to keep me on a level thing, I no longer needed. And I never, ever took one since. And I had to ring him up, because something had changed in me. No, transformed inside me. It gave me hope, it gave me peace, it gave me love.
So I get this phone call, and he says, it's me. I said, mate, are you okay? He says, yeah, I'll give my life to Jesus, and I want you to be the first to know. And started me off. Proper blokes cry, with snot, the lot. Proper blokes cry. And Andy, can you stick up? I want to show you a couple of slides and the effect this had on one of my colleagues. A couple of photographs. You see that one? That was taken pretty early doors with Chris. And the next one, Andy. And yeah, it is the same bloke. But go back to the other one. And then back to that one. You see the difference in his face? My mate, that day, my colleague, we went out to see Chris, met him in a coffee house. And my mate said to me, he says, that bloke's face has changed. He says, he's changed. And it was there, it's so visible. When I said, yeah, it's changed because it's Jesus has touched him. That's why it's changed. So God took two blokes, one from over there, professionally, one from over there, and he united at the cross. Hit the next slide, please, Andy. That little fella, you'll see him tomorrow, it's a bit bigger now. That's my grandson, William. When we were coming up to have William dedicated to the Lord, my daughter, Hayley, who sits here, said, Dad, I want his godfather to be a strong man of God who's going to look after him, and I want him to be Chris. Chris is the godfather to my grandson. That's bonkers, isn't it? And in the world's eyes, it's bonkers. And hit the next one if you would, please, sir. That photograph is when Chris got married to his beautiful Rosie here. Is it 2 years or 3? 2 years ago. Because so much happened during COVID, didn't it? And Rosie's mum and dad are no longer here, so I had the privilege of being the father of the bride. My wife had the privilege of being mother of the bride. It's bonkers, isn't it? I'm over here, he's over here. We're united by the cross. Hit the next one, please, Andy. And there's me and my brother Chris on his really special day. And you can shove the next one on if you would, be so kind. Because that's coming to the end of things. But the reason I wanted to, this whole experience is such a beautiful story. And by the way, my youngest grandson is being dedicated tomorrow, which we're uber excited about. Chris is his godfather. Not my choice, my daughter's choice. Not that I'm against that, of course, but if I take you back to the very beginning, 9th of October 2010, when I prayed that prayer in that cathedral, God answered that prayer. I didn't know what I was going to do. How come I ended up working in a counter-terrorism arena in a job that I had no experience in? How come? I think I know why. Because God used, and I see God all the way through it. God answered that prayer. He answers prayer in a way that I never thought he would. But he answered that prayer. And it also taught me, nobody's too far down the line. Nobody's too lost. Don't matter what you've done. What he says is, come home. Come home. I love you. Come home. That's what he says. And it also taught me this whole experience, because I spend the bulk of my life now speaking to different groups of fellas to try and encourage them, to give them the confidence to look their mate in the eye and tell him about his Saviour. Because it's the best thing you can do for another bloke, is tell him about his Lord and Saviour. And this experience made me unafraid, because I've still got my teeth. So to wrap up this part of the story, and I'm going to end up to Chris to finish, back to Chris. God took, and I can't stress this enough, God answered that prayer, and he took two blokes from completely opposed walks of life and united us at the cross. And that's the message that comes out of this. So I'm going to hand over to Chris to finish, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's an awesome story, but like I said before, we've all got one. I'm sure there's many of you, like I said, we could share one or two things of similar ilk of your sufferings and pains. So I want to bring this up to date and then speak about the one that we should really be speaking about tonight. A lot changed. Someone used to say, "Oh, you've changed, Chris." And I says, I've not been transformed, because the trouble with change is you can change back. Jesus ain't in the business of offering change. Jesus didn't come down to earth, right, to make our lives easier, because I'm telling you, since I was a Christian, I've faced some of the toughest things of my life. One of them being a major heart attack. When they rushed me down, blue lights, I've got severe pain, and I get overcome with this sense of peace I've never had. And I gave my testimony to the ambulance crew while they were attaching me to wires. And I can't boast in myself, right, because Chris would have been really, really crapping himself, to be honest, but this peace came above me, onto me, and one of the nurses said, "You're the happiest cardiac arrest victim we've ever seen." Why is that? And when you get asked why, you've got to give a reason why you have hope. And the whole point of tonight is to say to you guys that this ain't about me. Yesterday, Good Friday, we remembered a man who was beaten, whipped, tortured, who carried a cross, hung on it, an innocent man. And he did that for people like me. He did that for people like you. He's always said to me, there's never a fence to sit on. Oh, I either believe, or maybe I don't. Because he says, you're either for me, or you are against me. And I've exhausted the religions and tried things, but I've never had this peace. And then what he did was, the lad who had no education, because it was robbed from him, was now been taken across the whole of the UK. And I had the privilege to share this story to over 50,000 people. Then I get invited, little old me with no education, to go down to the Houses of Parliament to speak to the British government about hate. I could never do that in my own strength. And these people listen. They listen. I'm not saying they're right, they at least listen. And then everything I touched relationship-wise always fell away. And then God brought into my life this awesome woman, Rosa, who just happens to be a speech and language. I call her a teacher, yeah. In fact, more, I'd say, a surrogate mother to lost children. That's what she's become at her school. And what do you give a former kid who can't get his words out? You give him a speech and language who understands. And it's still there. I fight it. I have to fight against it. That language problem's still there. But you know, when I share, and I have the privilege to share, then it tends not to happen. That's pretty amazing. So my question for you is, I don't know where you are. If you got faith or what? If you feel you haven't got a story to give, if it wasn't for this man telling me one day about this man called Jesus in that car, I don't think I'd be here, if I'm honest. You know, we've got to bite our lips and talk the truth. And I can't prove to you, I can't get any mathematical equation and prove to you that God exists. We could argue that one all day, but what I can't deny is that something that I prayed to, that I can't see, transformed me from the inside out, and gave me hope, he gave me a future. And I believe that Jesus, come tomorrow, we celebrate his resurrection, right, because he is still as alive in 2022 than he was back then. Because the people I come across, men and women that I see, are being transformed beyond recognition. The world cannot do that. You've got a story. Usually when you read a book, you can go to the back and see how it ends. Well, do you know, because of what I believe, because of what that man did on that cross, I know how it's going to end. It's going to end good. It's going to end good for those people who believe. But it ain't going to be so good for those people that don't believe. That's what it says. And I want to challenge you where you are tonight. Today is always the day of salvation. And I want everyone in this room to make a choice. To look to the truth. To accept this into your life. My life has been full of ups and downs since. He never promised me a rose garden, you know? But one thing he has given me is a peace that passes all understanding and the strength to get through stuff I never thought I could, to do things that is impossible for me to do. How can I go down to the Houses of Parliament and share just a story? You've all got one. How's it going to end? How is it going to end? Are you going to be endlessly wondering about this man called Jesus? Why did I come to this? I thought that when I went to that one. Revolutionised my life, gave me hope. And you know what? My children are slowly, they see, they can't deny who I am now. I'm not proud of that stuff. I'm proud to call myself a Christian. Do I deserve it? No, none of us do. Because the word says that. But because he loves us first, he offers us freedom, life, everlasting life. I want to challenge you tonight to think about that. And we're going to give you a chance to respond. No one's going to see it because we'll all shut our eyes. And I'll just ask you to put your hand up. And then if there's others here that want to have a chat afterwards, come and speak to us. And we'll pray with you. So if we can all shut our eyes, please. Lord, I thank you for what you did on the cross. I thank you that you gave me hope. You gave my brother Gask hope. And you know each and every one of us intimately. You know all of our stories. You know where we are with faith or without it. So if there's anyone here who doesn't know Jesus, well, everyone's got their eyes shut, who wants to, please put your hand up. Lord, we just thank you for everything that you offer us and do. So if we could just say a prayer together, I'll say it, and then if you guys want to either think it or say it out loud, please do. Oh Lord Jesus, I thank you that you are real. Lord, I believe that you died on the cross for me. Lord, I just want to say sorry for living my life my way. And Lord, I just want to follow you from this day. Give me the strength, Lord, to turn to you and not to the world. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. So guys, I'll pass you back to Gask, but please come and chat to us.
Yeah, again, I just want to thank you for inviting Chris and myself to speak to you this evening, and thank you for those who just responded. So please come and talk to us. Please come talk to Jonathan. He's your man. He's your main man. And those that are involved with this church, I just want to say thank you for how you've embraced my daughter and my son-in-law and my boys. It means a lot. So God bless you all and thank you.